Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickinson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Mayor of Dubbo Regional Council, Matthew Dickinson, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Rod. Great to be chatting to you.
You survived the storm?
Yeah, it was actually quite interesting. We were in a council meeting in Wellington. Every few months we meet in Wellington rather than in Dubbo. So we're in Wellington meeting. One of our councillors couldn't make it down to Wellington, so he was coming in via video conference. So we've got him up on screen. And then he was talking about the storm and the wind and just the noise outside from the storm. We actually weren't seeing a lot of it. We heard a few little cracks of thunder in Wellington, but it seemed to be very localised around Dubbo. But then we lost all power completely, so we're sitting there in the dark in the council meeting, which I haven't had happen before as a mayor, even as a councillor. So we had to adjourn the meeting while we waited for power to come back on. Luckily, it wasn't too long. But then our streaming service didn't have sound coming through because our internet connection dropped off. So we had a few issues there, but obviously not really that bad in the scheme of things. In Dubbo, people had a whole range of things happening. Trees were blowing down, obviously. Drains were being blocked, which was really fascinating, not by trees or debris, but drains were being blocked by ice. You don't expect in the middle of summer to have a drain blocked by ice. So people were getting water flowing back into their houses in some situations, unfortunately, because of ice blocking some of the drains, some of the stormwater drains. There were people with houses that had trees on top of them, and in fact mine was one of them. My wife, while I'm in the council meeting, was sending me through text messages with photos of our house with a tree across the top of it from the neighbour's yard. So it was a bit of bedlam everywhere, but the really good thing, Rod, was that no injuries, no incidents where people were driving along and had a tree down in front of them suddenly. So no major accidents, certainly some property damage, but property damage you can replace, but people damage is obviously a bit harder to replace.
Well, that's very lucky. It's terrible when these sorts of things happen, but as long as everyone's okay.
Yeah, and what we are doing, just to try and help the community out a little bit, Rod, lots of people have got branches, trees, that sort of thing down, and getting rid of those is a bit of a problem. It can be quite expensive trying to get a skip bin in or taking all those out to the tip. So for 1 week only through to the end of next Sunday, or this Sunday coming up, then we've got a free tipping service for green waste and damaged by the storm green waste. We don't really want to see someone make this the time to go and cut down that tree they've been meaning to cut down and slice it into nice even blocks and then go out and expect to have green waste for free. It really is designed for people that have got those things that have come down during the storm to go out there and drop those off for free. That's some small thing that council can do to help people out.
That's another good thing you're doing. Now, your airport there is quite a nice airport, well designed, and it sees a lot of traffic through it, but there was some traffic trying to go through it.
I actually thought our parking was pretty close to the airport or to the terminal itself, Rod, but a couple of gentlemen, actually more than a couple of gentlemen, but two cars decided that they'd want to come all the way into the terminal. So last week, early one morning, about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, some people decided to do, and I'd say ram raid, but I've watched the video and it was at about 10 kilometres an hour, so I'm not sure that it really is a ram raid when it's going that slow. So they drove through the front panes of glass, smashed those in, jumped out of the car and then walked in and looked around for cash by the look of what I could see on the videos. But gee, I don't know that an airport's known for much cash. Some people were asking what were they doing, trying to steal a plane. I really don't understand why you would pick the airport as an area to go and try and break into, because there's not a lot of cash there. I don't think they would have found much of any interest there whatsoever. So they did that. We obviously had to board that up very quickly. The good news was that all of the security screening, all of the normal processes for the airport were all fully operational. So people that were on the 6:30 flights, they still got on their flights. Everything went as per normal, and obviously police were investigating and still will investigate, but those videos are pretty clear in terms of the people. They put balaclavas on their head, but the police are still pretty good at spotting people and just by the way they walk and the way they move. So they're already on to those people, and again, we've just got to repair that front of the airport now.
Another job for you to do, but in the process, you've been looking at the security screening anyway.
We have, and we actually had to do something that I've never done before as mayor. Under Section 226D of the Local Government Act, the mayor can make full council resolution decisions between council meetings if there are extraordinary circumstances. You can't get an extraordinary meeting together, for example, or there's some emergency you've got to take care of. Now, I'm reluctant to ever use that particular part of the Act because you don't want some mayor to go on some power-crazed hunger spree of using all of the powers that he or she can. But in this particular scenario, the federal government, which controls security around airports, had given us a couple of warnings about some minor breaches in our security screening, just the number of people we had there, the way searches were conducted, just some minor things. We'd been having some discussions with our security providers, that's a contractor that we have there, and in the end they were having a few troubles with getting staff, and they made the decision to basically hand the contract back. Obviously, we need security screening at the airport, otherwise flights can't go. So that was a fairly urgent situation. Our staff did a fantastic job, worked out another security contractor that could come in at very late notice. The first one gave us a little bit of time to get that changeover. And then I actually had to go and appoint a new security screening service without going to tender, which is again something you would normally do, but because we needed that under that urgent situation. So I did actually exercise those powers, which I don't like to do, but in this case it was around Christmas time, had little choice. I did email out to my fellow councillors and say, here's what I'm about to do, any issues with this, any problems with that, but they came back and said, no, we've got to do it. So you might notice when you go through security screening now, there's some new security personnel there. Some of them are the same personnel, but with a different company. The new company came in and talked to some of the existing staff to offer some of them their jobs if they wanted to continue on. So that was fine. But again, they're the sort of things, you don't realise all the things that council's doing behind the scenes and all the different things council's involved with. It's not just roads, rates and rubbish. If we hadn't have had that situation being able to be taken care of, then we would have had no airport or no flights being able to go from an airport because we didn't have security screening. So pretty important thing.
Very important. Now, what's happening with folks just building bigger and bigger sheds?
It is a bit of a problem. We've got obviously normal development applications you've got to put in. If you want to build a shed in your backyard to put your boat or your caravan or just your cars in it, you put a normal development application in. But that development application really looks at the zoning for that area and obviously the building, the construction of that building to make sure it's going to be safe. It doesn't really look at the size of that particular building. And so what we're finding now is we're getting some neighbours complaining about some of those DAs because you're getting a bit of overshadowing from this big shed that's being built next door. We don't have a specific policy that says you can't build something that big. There are certain size restrictions, but they're building something sometimes almost as big as their house. So it's not a real control over that. And it's not a great argument for the neighbour to say, look, it's affected my amenity or I don't like that view. So we're actually going to introduce a new development control plan. There's a development control plan we have in place at the moment, but add to it. And this is going to add some provisions for sheds and garages being built and just to keep something on the size of them under control. So we've got some draft amendments at the moment. We're going to put those out on public exhibition, get some comments back from people. Some people might love the idea to build whatever size they want. Other people might want to restrict how big they are next door. But again, the idea is to get a policy around it, and then each time an application comes in, we can just compare that to a policy rather than treating each application on its merits individually.
All right, and water, you're having water harmonisation.
This is going to, well, it does sound zen, but I don't think it's going to be very zen. Back when the two councils were amalgamated, Wellington Shire Council and Dubbo City Council, it's back on the 12th of May 2016, one of the conditions of the amalgamation is that the new council must get the rating structure the same between the two old council areas by the 1st of July 2021. That had to happen. Now, when you look at the rating structure, that's already happened, obviously, because that date's passed. And that means that if you're in the same zone in either old council area, it's all got to be the same rates. That makes sense. It's meant to be one local government area. The state government doesn't dictate that water and sewer must also be the same between the two old LGAs. So what happened is the last council said, well, that's too tough a decision. We'll leave it alone. We won't go and make them the same. It still seems like the right and sensible thing to do. So this council is going to take that on, which means that if you've got the same size connection in the same area, commercial, residential, that type of thing, for water or sewer, you're going to pay the same rates. And now at the moment, the old Wellington Shire has a tiered structure. So 0 to 300 kilolitres, you pay one rate, 300 to the next level, you pay another rate, on it goes. Dubbo's got a flat fee structure. So you've got those things. You've got the differences in the type of connections, the size of connection, differences in the sewerage. So we're going to have that all the same. But as you can imagine, if you're going to make them all the same, there's going to be some winners and some losers. Some people are going to be paying more, some people are going to be paying less. So it's a brave, some may say foolhardy decision to go forward with this, but we believe it's the right thing to do, because if it's one LGA, shouldn't it just be the one fee structure across the whole LGA? So we're aiming to have that done by the 1st of July this year. We're starting to talk about it early, get some draft rates out there just to get people talking about it.
And what's happened with the electricity projects that you're planning?
Well, we've got two main electricity contracts that we run at council. One that's called our small sites contract and our large sites. If you're using less than 100 megawatt hours per year on a site, that goes into the small sites. So our small sites tender or contract ran out in December last year. About the middle of last year, we went through a contract process and we actually chose an option there under that tender for 100% renewable power, and we saved about $120,000 a year from that. That was last year. This year, in the middle of the year, we've got our large sites come off. Now, it was a tender process, so I can't talk about the individual tenders, but it's pretty easy to look at our budget and see that we spend anywhere from, say, $4 to $5 million a year on our large sites. Water and sewer are actually two of the biggest users of that particular electricity. So we went out to tender, and we had a variety of options there for the tender, but we were talking about potentially up to 10 years on that tender. So you're talking about $4 to $5 million a year over 10 years, potentially a $50 million contract. Now that tender came back. We considered that under confidential session because it was a tender. And we considered that on Thursday night last week. One of the things that's really tough for councillors at the moment is it's an incredibly volatile electricity market. And you look at a graph, we had a consultant come along to give us a presentation. You look at a graph, that graph goes along slowly climbing as it basically was before the last couple of years, when you've just got almost a steady CPI type increase. And then the last couple of years, it just bounced up and down all over the place. So trying to pick a time, the right time, to go into a contract for that is pretty tough. So in the end, councillors said, well, we've got a few months up our sleeve. We don't think we've got enough information to make the right decision. Let's go out to market again and just see what other options we've got out there, and maybe not a 10-year contract, because, gee, that seems like a long time when we've got this hugely volatile market at the moment. So it was a long discussion, but I think we got to the right decision in the end to actually go back and look at this a bit further.
All right, and the New South Wales local government elections are being held next year. Are you going to be involved?
Well, council's not going to be involved in terms of running the election. And that's one of the decisions you've got to make with plenty of time. So by March this year, we have to formally advise the New South Wales Electoral Commission if we'd like to use their services for the election. Now, way back when, before I got in on council, back when Tony Kelly was our general manager, and I remember talking to him about it, council used to run the elections when they came around every 4 years, or it was a slightly different time frame back then, but say every 4 years. And that's just got hairs all over it, in my opinion. You can just imagine any accusations of bias if a councillor got on and then the council staff would be accused of looking after someone they liked or not. So really it's something that we're not set up to do it. We haven't necessarily got the skill set to do it. And again, those issues where you might be accused of different things. So we had to make a decision as to whether to run it in-house or to contract it out to the Electoral Commission. So we decided to go to the Electoral Commission. It made sense all round. But the thing that gets me, Rod, is that they give you an estimate of the cost. $638,000 they've estimated the cost. And that was one of the reasons we did consider running it internally, because we thought surely we could do it dramatically cheaper than $638,000. But again, just for that democracy, if you like, just having that clean process to give it to the experts, we thought that was worthwhile. But I still shudder at those costs. That's a lot of potholes we could fill.
Certainly is. Matthew Dickerson, I thank you for your time today.
Always my pleasure, thank you, Rod.
Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.